Imagine for a moment that someone wrote a book that claimed that urban Black Americans were some of the most dangerous, racist, and vile people in the whole country, and they constitute a threat to our way of government, or our way of life rather, in our American form of government. What would happen? Well, that person would likely be dragged out in front of the public square, torn and fettered by the current cultural factions, myself included most likely, and they would lose every single thing that they've worked for in their life, if they have anything that they've worked for. But when someone turns around and does the same exact thing to white Americans, particularly rural white Americans, what happens? Well, not only does the risk seem less than the reward, those people happen to get a prime spot on MSNBC to not only spew their garbage, but to promote a book that they both wrote, published by a major publisher, which expounds upon their garbage. I am talking about none other than Paul Waldman and Thomas Schaller. Now, both of these gentlemen wrote a book called White Rule Rage, The Threat to American Democracy. And they went on MSNBC to promote this book. Before I go into anything that they're going to say, before I even address this, it's very important that you all see for yourself what they are trying to say. So watch this clip.
Joining us now, Professor of Political Science at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Tom Schaller, and journalist and opinion writer Paul Waldman. Their new book, out tomorrow, is entitled White Rural Rage, The Threat to American Democracy. And Tom, we'll start with you. Why are white rural voters a threat to democracy at this point? You would think, as we pointed out, looking at Joe Biden's background and Donald Trump's, that the opposite would be true.
I mean, we lay out the fourfold interconnected threat that white rural voters pose to the country. First of all, and we show 30 polls and national studies to demonstrate this, so we provide the receipts in Chapter 6. They're the most racist, xenophobic, anti-immigrant, and anti-gay geodemographic group in the country. Second, they're the most conspiracist group. QAnon support and subscribers, election denialism, COVID denialism and scientific skepticism, Obama birtherism. Third, anti-democratic sentiments. They don't believe in an independent press, free speech. They're most likely to say the president should be able to act unilaterally without any checks from Congress or the courts or the bureaucracy. They're also the most strongly white nationalist and white Christian nationalists. And fourth, they are most likely to excuse or justify violence as an acceptable alternative to peaceful public discourse.
So you mentioned a lot of negative factors about this demographic.
All right, as you see there, they make several claims that I find incredibly concerning. Let us first start with this idea. Let's actually first start with the errors that they're doing. What they're doing is they are trying to do something I call reasoning by means of averages, or reasoning by means of statistics. Basically, when you look at any set of data and you try to extrapolate value from that data beyond what the data actually provides you, you are committing an error, because statistics don't actually tell you the why. They tend to just tell you the what. And in order to find the why in any given situation, you have to be willing to search and use your powers of reason and deduction, and also in a coordination with those powers, good faith, to be able to actually find the reason behind the phenomenon the statistics observe. But the problem is academics and people like Thomas and all these people, they like to use stats as a weapon of rhetorical and intellectual war, as opposed to simply a yardstick or a measurement of a particular phenomenon that requires further thought to be explored. And in doing this, they are also committing another fallacy called the generalization fallacy. Whenever you slap a single label upon an entire group of people, and you then make a claim about those group of people, you cannot possibly understand or prove that claim, because there are so many different variations and so many different facets to people in that single category. Not even a single group united by the same principles or same ideas are the same, but in this case, it's not a group united by ideas. It's a group united entirely by race. Now, the true error in what these gentlemen are trying to say is that they are assuming that the beliefs that this demographic supposedly hold. I'm saying supposedly because I just mentioned to you that when you go into this idea of reasoning by means of averages and statistics, you've already blinded yourself to the proper venues to find what people actually think. You've simply used a base measurement, and then you fill the significance of that measurement in with your own individual thoughts, and you've let your own biases taint the stats as opposed to the stats speaking for themselves. But in general, the real problem is that these authors in the interview assert several different claims without actually proving them. These authors, for example, assert that because this demographic tends to vote for Trump, and actually I found data on that, they do, young and old, white rural voters tend to vote for Trump, they are somehow dangerous and anti-democratic. And because this demographic is supposedly anti-democratic, they are supposedly dangerous to the country. Well, the premise here is that America is a democracy, which is not true whatsoever. Any thinking person, any well-reasoned person, any person that actually is going to be honest with both history and political philosophy will quickly find out that America is nothing approaching a democracy. We are a classically Republican system that took the Roman principles of res publica and applied them in our 18th century Enlightenment context and refined them to a way that was uniquely and fundamentally American, which is why America puzzles so many people, because they don't understand just how unique we are structurally. You don't see countries like America before the 18th century. It just didn't really exist. You may see countries that had aspects of American philosophy in them, but structurally, more philosophically, and legally, no, you don't really see something like this until about the mid-18th century. And so democracy, though, is this catchphrase that really means nothing whatsoever. Democracy is simply an incoherent political idea, which suggests that whatever the greatest number says has to be policy. That's not a political system. That's not a political philosophy. That's quite literally a political mechanism of control that has nothing to do with ideas. An idea that has no first principles underlying it, especially a political idea that has no sense of first principles underlying it, cannot possibly be coherent. Because if you're going to justify democracy on the basis that it's just good for the majority to have what they want and to be able to just have intimate interaction with the details of their government, then you've actually not told me anything other than the fact that you think that numbers somehow necessitate or make good policy. That's obviously not true, because majorities fall into pitfalls all the time. But these authors are working from the premise that democracy is not only a good system, not only a coherent system, but also an American system, and none of those things are true whatsoever. Democracy is an abstraction, incoherent, which has no principles, and simply says what the majority wants is what is best and what should be accepted, which is absolutely fundamentally untrue. If you have a political system that is detached from first principles, it is not a system. It is a fantasy trying to worm its way into reality. But we go beyond that. These authors are coming at this entire issue from a progressive point of view. So in order to understand their arguments, you have to also, in a sense, understand them as well. Thomas Schaller, he is a professor of political science at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. He's written for Salon, The Nation, American Prospect, Washington Post, The New York Times. These are all left-wing, progressive-type publications. His partner, Mr. Paul, he actually has written a lot. He's a journalist. He's written a heck of a lot on how whiteness is a problem. Indeed, it says right here that Waldman has proposed that Donald Trump, drawing on decades of rhetoric which amplifies whiteness as an identity and a locus of oppression, has utilized white identity into a foundational aspect of his presidency. So on one hand, you have an academic who is dyed-in-the-wool establishment leftist, whose own worldviews and premises he's not challenging or asking questions about. He's assuming them and then asserting them and then going towards the public and trying to make the public assert them as well and thus cause political chaos. Then you have Paul Waldman, who literally said that whiteness is a locus of oppression and that Donald Trump's whiteness is one of the reasons he was an authoritarian and that he was bad as president. So you've got two racists explaining their racism in their own unique ways, much to the chagrin of all of us that are thinking people, and to the chagrin of all of us that actually want a country that is healthy and that is cooperative. And their progressivism is important because they're coming from a sort of non-foundation of knowledge, assuming a bunch of things and then tying those things that are not based on any kind of concrete knowledge into their claims. And again, if the premise is false, everything that flows from it, like a river that is tainted at the headwaters, has to also be necessarily false, or it has to be corrupted. And so whenever you see someone make claims like this, like, oh, white people are dangerous or whatever, ask yourself, on what basis of knowledge are you making that? Are you making it on statistics that you can manipulate and frame in a way that is advantageous to your own political viewpoint? Okay, that's also faulty. But what is the broader worldview? If the broader worldview is that everyone is a group or a collective or an abstract member of an identity category, you can reject that outright, because not only is it fundamentally false, but anything made on that basis is also fundamentally false, because it is so easily disprovable by material reality, quite simply. But there's also a deeper phenomenon going on here as well. These gentlemen went to the media to promote their nonsense. And there is a perverse relationship between the media, academia, and public perception, because the entire idea of manufacturing consent suggests that people will trust certain sources, they'll trust certain institutions, and then they will take that trust and they will translate it into what they believe. So when people like this, Mr. Waldman and Mr. Schaller, are able to literally come into these systems of trust and hijack them from their own purposes, we have to really ask ourselves, as a society, do we trust too much in our institutions, at least in some cases, and do we trust too little in our powers of reason? The reason that trust in corporate media is going down, according to Gallup surveys, is because more Americans are realizing that what they have been told is either a product of a particular faction in society that wants them to believe a certain thing and happens to have the most amount of dominance and media control, or it is a product of an outright lie from the media companies themselves that they simply say for whatever reason they want. Right? For example, why did Dan Rather lie about his assignment that he was on? Why did he lie about that? Why have so many other anchors lied? Why did Geraldo Rivera go to the so-called bunker and expose it? Why did they do this? Because within the media system, there are norms and realities that they wish to see emergent and they wish to see strong, which oftentimes conflict with the truth. And clickbait is just another example of this. In the clickbait world, what sells and what is most emotionally provocative is going to be more important, according to people that believe in clickbait, than what is the truth. The media has fallen prey to this. And so in a society where trust has been violated, in a society where trust has also been delegated towards institutions that abuse it for political and other purposes, we have to really ask ourselves, in what way moving forward should we trust our institutions? And how should we deal with the relationship between the expert class and the media class? Because again, just like people trust the media institutions to be validators of information, people have historically trusted academics as experts to also be validators of information as well. But this trust is not based in substance. This trust is based in aesthetics. It's based in status. In a society run off of status, it's a society where man's moral imagination and thinking is limited by his unwillingness to see beyond the surface and see beyond the sort of superficial veneer that happens to surround him in his everyday life and actually see things in a much deeper way. These two gentlemen can only come up here in a free society and a civilized society and speak their nonsense and only receive backlash from a certain corner of society because status has captured the minds of the masses and has made them docile towards blatant and utter irrationality and evil. Imagine if there was a Klan man, right, who had said the same thing about black people, but did it on the side of the street. Well, because they don't have the status, they would be attacked and all kind of bad things would happen to them, and justifiably so. But when it's a professor or a media person in a suit that has written a book and has all of these designations and all of these qualifications, it somehow seems less perverse, even though the content of what these two gentlemen are pushing and what the Klan pushes is almost identical towards different topics and different targets. Different story, different day. But more generally, beyond the logic, beyond the philosophy, beyond the confusions, harmony is the prerequisite for a flourishing society. And the more rhetoric like this is tossed around, the less harmonious society becomes, the less harmonious the races become, and the less harmonious our future seems to be. And when there's an entire industry of these people, validated by status, given a platform by the media, that can just endlessly and seamlessly push out this kind of stuff with absolutely no intellectual pushback coming from major society, coming from our circles, yes, coming from like certain circles, yes, but coming from mass society, there's a problem. And that doesn't signify that there is no resistance or objection to the idea, it's just the opposite. It signifies, rather, that there is a docility amongst the majority that has weakened them towards evil, and that the people that are actually being attacked may feel threatened enough to develop new strategies to defend themselves. There are two paths that we have in this country to go down. We can go down the path of race consciousness or individualism. A lot of white Americans and white people are endorsing and taking up the banner of race consciousness. They are beginning to say that they are proud of being white. They are beginning to say that there's nothing that whiteness is something that is not just your skin color or whatever, but it's something greater, something grander, something bigger. And a lot of the identity-based movements that have been around for a long time on both the left and the right are taking advantage of this and using it to their own vile purposes. Race consciousness is not the answer to racial hatred, because race consciousness does the same exact thing that racial hatred does. Race consciousness says that on the hierarchy of values, at the very top is your race. It's your skin color, it's how you look, it's your genetic composition. But this is what we call conflating aesthetics for substance. Just because you look a certain way, or your genes look a certain way, does not necessarily mean anything beyond the fact that you are constituted in a certain way. When you try to extract from biological realities moral values, you will almost always get a disconnection between what is right and what is wrong, because you will be confused. It causes a moral confusion. So just as when someone says that whiteness is evil, that's obviously trying to extract a moral value from biological reality, and that's bad, and that's wrong, and that's erroneous. When someone says that black is beautiful, or black is great, or black pride, or when someone says white pride or white power, they're all doing and saying the same thing in different ways. But many people can't see beyond what they're saying, and instead will simply dig into their own emotions and allow those emotions to guide how they interact with these topics. If you are a thinking person, you can't embrace race consciousness, because there is no consciousness to race. Race has no value beyond mere appearances. But if we embrace individualism, we are hitting at the heart of a universal quality of every single human being on this planet, that we are a unique individual composed of a rational mind, composed of a soul, and composed of a free will which enables us to act in ways that are either good or bad, but still enables us to interact with this world in a way that is more beneficial, in a way that is more successful, in a way that is more meaningful than any other animal that came before us or currently inhabits the wilds of nature. That means something. That is morally tangible. That is the spirit that ignited America a long time ago. And if we hold on to that, perhaps our consciousness will be less about our race and more about our world, our humanity, and our place within it. It is the goal of progressives like Mr. Paul and Thomas Schaller to get us away from that kind of thinking. Because to the progressive, everyone is reduced to a class, to a group, to a racial identity, and we must organize society on that basis. I say we reject that. We reject this nonsense of white rule rage, and we instead embrace good old-fashioned Americanism. We embrace individualism, and we cooperate on the basis of our merits and our goodwill towards each other, and leave everything else to the side for the sake of the preservation of our civilization. My friends, like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Be sure also to donate to me if you want to. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally vigilant, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.